Hi folks, you're with Tacitus today at your Pushback channel, and thank you for joining this radio live stream. In this essay, I'd like to talk about how the political class and the media class are inventing problems that don't exist in order to distract us from what the real issues are. Now, the real issues are, the cost of living, that housing is 3 to 4 times more expensive than it was 50 years ago, that energy is 3 to 4 times more expensive relative to purchasing power than it was 50 years ago. That by any and all measures, our standard of living is declining. The difference between purchasing power and income is being made up by debt. So people are in debt to levels that would have been unthinkable 50 years ago. But I want to talk about how the political and media class and the permanent elite class are attempting to force upon us, if you like, a false economy and a false reality, and demanding not only that we accept that 2 and 2 plus 2 equals 5, but even to the point where threatening draconian measures, if not imprisonment or fines, if we don't agree with that. So it's not a pleasant situation to be in, but just looking at it more widely, this capacity to invent problems and invent solutions and invent remedies is, I would assert, generally a feminist mindset. And just as an analogy, I'll use one some years ago, in fact many years ago, maybe 30 years ago. So I was dating dating this girl who she was convinced that she was overweight. I didn't think she was, but she decided that she was. So we talked about, well, what do you want to do? You can eat fewer chocolate biscuits, you can do more exercise. She didn't live that far from where she works, so you can walk to work instead of taking the car, or instead of using the public transport system. So that exercise will be, no, I don't want to do that. No, I like chocolate biscuits. No. So what she ended up doing was getting the weighing scales that we kept in the bathroom, and she dialed back the starting point. So instead of starting at 0 and then measuring her weight from there, and she'd dial it back by, say, 10 pounds or 5 kilos approximately. She'd dial it back. So she'd step on the scales to weigh herself when it was already minus 10 or 11 pounds to begin with. She would then say, well, I'm feeling better about myself now because I'm not overweight. And just to use round numbers as a case, an example here, let's say she wanted to weigh 100 pounds, but she's really 110. I mean, she weighed more than that, but for example, so she would start at minus 10 pounds, minus 11 pounds, and say, look, I'm 100 pounds. That's the weight I want to be. So I'm happy about that. So now the effect of this was a fantasy world, of course. But I didn't think that she was overweight. And she had a full-time job, and she was doing going to night school to do a course. So it's not a whole lot of time, but if you want to do something about it, she would say, well, okay, maybe I'm not overweight, but I don't have the muscle tone and I want the muscle. Well, fine, put the work in. Now, there was a difference between, say, not all men, but in my view, if I wanted to lose weight or have better, muscle tone and that sort of thing, I would do more exercise, and I would start looking at my diet and those sorts of things. Eat fewer chocolate biscuits or less candy or something like that. So, or more nutritious food, or maybe have slightly smaller meals or something like that, and do more exercise. But her response, and it's not unique in this, I come across these women in the workforce as well, thinking along the same lines, if not exactly the same, certainly very similar. Let's artificially create an environment that makes me feel better about myself, and then the remedies I can apply will also change, and the remedies need to be less effective, or not effective at all, because of in her case of starting to weigh herself on the scales from already minus 10 or 11 pounds. But all the attempts to, she would talk about it frequently, the attempts to do something about it. I said, well, why don't you go to the gym? I don't have time. Well, why don't you, go and again, do more exercise, do more walking or something like that? No, I don't want to. And there's always an excuse, it's too hot, it's too cold, it's too wet or something like that. So you really have to be quite focused and really want to do it. But it begins with accepting what the absolute reality is, and then taking the responsibility to do something about it, and what you need to do to change the situation, whether it's lose weight or get better muscle tone, whatever it might be. But I was completely unsuccessful in getting her to do this, or not getting her to do it. She was the one coming to me and sort of saying, oh, I feel bad about myself. Then it sort of morphed into saying, well, the reason I feel bad about myself, according to her, was that society, some amorphous sort of thing. It's patriarchy. She didn't use the word patriarchy. It wasn't around back then. But the patriarchy, it's misogyny, it's society in general is making me feel bad about myself, and therefore I have to take remedial action, and the only way I can feel good about myself is to create this fantasy world, and just avoid any sort of reality or any aspect of reality that may make me feel bad, according to her. So I thought, well, again, I don't think you've got a problem, in my view, but if you think you do, then do something about it. But no. The only way to solve it was, again, to create this fantasy world. Now, coming to the sort of the globalist thing. Now, the globalists always want to go for the women first. That's the easiest way to destabilize and take control of any society, is go for the women, and also separate the men from the women. The men as the natural protectors type thing. And to say, well, you women, you're still victims, but it's the state. The state is now your boyfriend or your husband or your partner, and that's the relationship that we want you to have. Now, just going on sort of with that, the major political parties, certainly in Australia, but elsewhere around the world, they're always talking about what must we do to attract the women voters. And if ever any party loses an election for whatever the reason, they could be the most diabolically useless party in the ever, but they'll always try and couch it. Oh, we didn't do enough to appeal to women. If only we do a bit more to appeal to women, we can win. We lost because we didn't satisfy women. Women are and so on. And that's going on in Australia at the moment. So the only way to solve it is quotas for women. That's the only way, and we have to. And all sorts of nonsense are brought out that women are uniquely impoverished following divorce. Well, now I don't know on what basis that's. It's legendary how generous the divorce courts are to women in property settlements, and if the man has any superannuation of substance that he can lose up to 80% of his superannuation, they hand over to his ex-wife, and that's for lifetime. So the superannuation payout can still be 20, 30 years in the future, but all the accrued value, which is the money he saved, can then be transferred to his ex-wife. And there's even cases where men are winning, say, a lottery 20, 30 years after the end of their marriage, and the ex-wife from 30 years ago can drag him into court and get half of his lottery winnings or lotto winnings, which seems quite extraordinary. But nonetheless, the talk at this particular political gab fest was that women are uniquely impoverished and uniquely disadvantaged following divorce. There's no explanation given or no details, or the research that is done is done by again, the usual gender studies, lesbians, activists, that sort of thing. It's hardly, you can tear it to pieces as soon as you look at it. It's hopeless in terms of quality research. but they wave it around nonetheless and say that the only way we can redress these problems is by severe social engineering. We have to create this fantasy world of problems that doesn't exist, and then create solutions to solve a fantasy problem. So this is something that's widespread, I believe, across the whole globalist landscape, and it's something they're doing. Whether it's climate change, whether it's race issues. Racists are everywhere, misogynists are everywhere, fascists are everywhere, Hitler is everywhere. It's always the same. It doesn't change. That they're going to the same issues that don't exist, inventing the same problems, but claiming that only very substantial and severe and intrusive social engineering can solve it. And if anyone's got a problem with that, then they're Hitler, and they have to be crushed accordingly. So I just want to talk about that generally and just make that point. And I think it's getting worse. And if there's any, none of the major parties, whether it be in Australia or elsewhere, political parties are talking about the things that matter to the people. They're all talking about these invented problems, such as climate change, and also describing the problems in very vague terms, so they can't be defined, and thus solutions can be wide-ranging and arbitrary because the problem doesn't exist, and any definitions that could exist are made so vague as to be a waste of time. You've been with Tacitus today, your Pushback channel, and thank you for listening.